The morning air in Emerald Estates didn't smell like nature. It smelled like high-end lawn chemicals and expensive irrigation water. I was sitting in my spot, a patch of dirt behind my tool shed that technically marks the edge of Serenity Pond. I call it a pond because that's what it is, a 4-acre drainage hole for the neighborhood's gutters. But the HOA brochures call it the lake. I had my old Shakespeare ugly stick rod in one hand and a thermos of black coffee in the other. I wasn't looking for a trophy bass. I was looking for 5 minutes of peace before I had to go back to fixing a short circuit in my guest bathroom. The peace lasted exactly 4 minutes. I heard the whine of a luxury engine before I saw her. Vicky's white Lexus SUV, the one with the Empress One plates, crunched onto the gravel path 20 feet behind me. She didn't get out. She just rolled down the tinted window, the cold AC misting out into the morning heat. "Joe, put the rod down!" her voice shrieked, cutting through the quiet like a rusty saw blade. "We've discussed this in the newsletter. Fishing is a Class B violation. It creates an attractive nuisance for low-income loiterers, and the scales attract raccoons. It's an eyesore." I didn't turn my head. I just watched my bobber dance on the surface. "Vicky, the only nuisance I see is that white SUV idling on the grass. You're violating the no idling rule you passed last Tuesday. Go count some mailboxes." She slammed the door. I heard her heels, those expensive pointed things, clacking toward me. The Pomeranian was yapping its head off. "I'm serious, Joe. The board voted. Effective immediately, the lake is visual only. No wading, no boating, and absolutely no fishing. I'm writing you a citation. $250 for the violation, and since I can see your tackle boxes open, that's another $300 for environmental hazard exposure. $550 total. It'll be on your portal by noon." I finally stood up. I'm 6'1" and 230 pounds of union-made muscle. Vicky didn't flinch. She just tapped her iPhone screen, her face lit up by the glow of the HOA's management app. $550 for sitting on a bucket, Vicky? You really think that's going to fly? It doesn't have to fly, Joe. It's an encumbrance on your title. Don't pay it, and we'll put a lien on your house. We've already done it to the Millers on Oak Street for their unauthorized bird feeder. We have the legal right to protect the aesthetic integrity of this community." She turned on her heel and marched back to her Lexus, leaving a cloud of perfume and arrogance in the air. I looked at the pond. It looked back at me, murky and still. That was the moment I realized that being a good neighbor was a losing game. It was time to play by the rules, their rules. I spent the next 3 days doing something Vicky would never expect from a guy in work boots. I read the Emerald Estates Master Covenant, all 214 pages of it. On Thursday night, I went to the HOA board meeting. It was held in the garden room of the community center, a place filled with fake ferns and the smell of stale coffee. Vicky sat at the center of the mahogany table, looking like a queen holding court. I waited until the open forum section. I stood up, holding a copy of the citation she'd emailed me. "Board," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room, "I'm here to discuss this $550 fine. I've lived here 22 years. My deed includes a general use clause for all shared amenities. You can't pass a bylaw that retroactively strips me of a property right without a 75% majority vote of all homeowners. You only had 12% at the last meeting." Vicky didn't even look up from her iPad. "The board has the emergency power to regulate safety and sanitation, Joe. Fishing is a sanitation issue. The fine stands. Next. I'm giving you a formal warning, Vicky, and I saw the yes men on either side of her shift uncomfortably. I've documented this meeting. I've recorded the fact that you are refusing to follow the amendment process outlined in the bylaws. If you don't rescind this fine within 48 hours, I'm going to stop being a neighbor and start being an owner. And you really, really don't want me owning anything in this neighborhood. Vicky actually laughed. She looked at the other board members and smirked. What are you going to do, Joe? Sue us? We have a $20,000 a month legal retainer paid for by your dues. Go ahead, throw your money away. The fine stands. And if I see you near that water again, I'm calling the sheriff for criminal trespass. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just nodded to the room, walked out, and drove straight to a small neon-lit office in the oldest part of town. Arthur's office felt like a time machine. There were no computers in the front room, just rows of filing cabinets that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Berlin Wall fell. I put a $500 cash retainer on his desk. Arthur, I need you to find out who owns the dirt under Serenity Pond. Arthur peered at me through his thick glasses. Most people assume the HOA owns it, Joe. Why do you care? Because Vicky is using it as a weapon. And if I know developers, they don't give away anything for free. Check the tax records, check the zoning orphan lists. It took Arthur 3 days. When he called me back, his voice was trembling with that high-pitched excitement he gets when he finds a disaster. Joe, you're not going to believe this. Emerald Estates was built by Emerald Ventures LLC in 1984. When they finished the last phase, they transferred the roads and the parks to the HOA, but they hit a snag with the pond. Because it's a retention basin and handles the county's overflow, the insurance costs were huge. And? I asked, gripping the phone. And they never transferred it. Lakeside Ventures went bust in '92. The parcel 44B, the pond and the 10-foot buffer around it, was left in the name of a dead corporation. For 30 years, nobody has paid the property taxes on it. The county has been sending tax bills to a P.O. box that hasn't existed since the Clinton administration. How much are the back taxes, Arthur? With interest, penalties, and the orphaned asset fees, $16,842. The county has a tax lien ready to go to auction next month, but since you're an adjacent property owner, you have the first right of refusal to pay the certificates and apply for a judicial deed. I did the math in my head. 16 grand was a lot of money. It was my new truck fund. But then I thought about Vicky's face and the way she'd laughed at the board meeting. Do it, Arthur. Pay the lien. File the petition for a judicial deed. I want that pond. I want the mud, the weeds, and every single gallon of runoff that comes off Vicky's driveway. The next 90 days were the longest of my life. I had to stay quiet. I had to let Vicky win for a little while. She caught me walking my dog near the pond one evening. She pulled over, her white Pomeranian barking out the window. "I see you've stayed away from the water, Joe," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Good boy. It's amazing how a little financial pressure can correct bad behavior. The board is thinking about adding a shoreline access fee next year, just to make sure only the right people are using the view." I just smiled. You're a visionary, Vicky, truly. Behind the scenes, Arthur was a shark. He filed the quiet title action. He published the required legal notices in a tiny local newspaper that nobody reads. He waited out the statutory redemption period. On a Tuesday afternoon in July, I walked into the county clerk's office. I walked out with a heavy, gold-sealed document. Warranty deed, parcel 44B. I didn't just own the pond. I owned the drainage pipe that connected the entire neighborhood storm system to the city line. I owned the land under the HOA's decorative gazebo. I owned the 6-foot strip of grass that ran directly behind Vicky's Infinity Edge backyard patio. I went home and called a local company that rents industrial-grade fencing. I need 500 linear feet of 6-foot chain link and 50 private property no-access signs, reflective, the kind you can see from space. When do you want it delivered? The guy asked. Saturday morning, 6 a.m., and tell your crew to bring some heavy-duty sledgehammers. We've got some property line definition to do. Saturday morning was the day of the HOA's annual lakeside brunch. It was the biggest social event of the year. Vicky had spent $10,000 of our dues on a floating bar and a catered buffet. She thought she was hosting a brunch. I knew she was hosting a trespassers convention. The humidity in North Carolina by 6 a.m. is already thick enough to chew on. I was standing in the middle of the neighborhood's sacred lakeside park, land that I now legally owned, watching 2 flatbed trucks back into the grass. The drivers were guys I knew from my days on the line, tough, quiet, and they didn't give a damn about aesthetic integrity. The trucks were loaded with 300 linear feet of commercial-grade black vinyl-coated chain link. I didn't want the silver stuff. I wanted the black kind because it looks more permanent. Along with the fence, they had 20 industrial-sized private property signs and a pallet of 80-pound bags of Quickcrete. "All right, boys," I said, tapping the certified survey map on my clipboard. "We're defining the perimeter of parcel 44B. The line runs exactly 6 inches off the back of those decorative pavers on the Empress's patio. I want to post every 8 feet, sunk 30 inches deep, and don't be stingy with the concrete." The sound of a power auger at 6 in the morning is like a gunshot in a library. It didn't take 5 minutes before a window slammed open upstairs in Vicky's house. I didn't look up. I just listened to the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the auger biting into the clay. 10 minutes later, Vicky was on her patio. She wasn't in her tennis whites yet. She was in a silk robe, clutching a coffee mug like she wanted to throw it at my head. Her Pomeranian was yapping so hard it was vibrating. "Joe, stop that noise right now. The catering staff is arriving in 2 hours. What the hell are these trucks on the common area?" I turned slowly, adjusted my camo cap, and took a long sip from my Yeti. "Morning, Vicky. These trucks aren't on the common area. They're on my driveway. Well, the extension of my driveway, anyway. We're just doing some safety upgrades to the pond." "Your driveway? You've lost your mind. That's the HOA lawn. I'm calling the police." "Call them," I said, signaling the crew to start mixing the concrete. "Tell them to bring a copy of the county tax map for Section 4. It'll save us all a lot of time." By 8 a.m., the catering vans for the annual lakeside brunch started pulling into the cul-de-sac. They were loaded with white linens, crystal glassware, and about $5,000 worth of chilled shrimp and mimosas. But they hit a snag. The path they usually took to the lakeside gazebo, the path that ran right behind Vicky's house, was now blocked by a 4-foot-deep trench and a row of steel posts. Vicky was out there in her full Empress gear now. White dress, oversized glasses, and enough perfume to kill a beehive. She was screaming at the catering foreman, a young kid who looked like he wanted to crawl into his own van and hide. "Just walk the crates across the grass," Vicky shrieked. "They can't do that, Vicky," I called out from my lawn chair. I had moved it right to the edge of the new fence line. "That grass is private property. Trespassing is a Class 3 misdemeanor in this state. And since I haven't seen a certificate of insurance from that catering company naming me as an additional insured party, I can't allow them to cross my land. Liability risks, you understand. I'm sure the board is very concerned about liability." Vicky marched over to me, her face a terrifying shade of magenta. Joe, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is the annual brunch. The mayor is coming. 2 state senators are coming. If you ruin this, the HOA will sue you for every penny you have. We will take your house. I stood up and handed her a manila envelope. Vicky, quit barking and read. This is a general warranty deed for parcel 44B, recorded Tuesday at 2:14 p.m. It includes the pond, the gazebo, the drainage easement, and the 6-foot buffer strip behind your patio. I didn't steal it. I bought it at a judicial tax sale after the original developer, Lakeside Ventures, abandoned it and the HOA failed to pay the back taxes for 30 years. She snatched the papers, her eyes darting across the legal jargon. I watched the moment the reality hit her. Her hands started to shake. This is a mistake. The title company. The title company missed it because it was an orphaned parcel listed under a defunct LLC. Arthur, my title specialist, spent 40 hours in the archives finding the break in the chain. Your HOA has been trespassing on private land since 1994, and since you saw fit to fine me $550 for unauthorized use of land that I now own, I've decided to return the favor. My management fee for the use of this gazebo today is exactly $10,000, cashier's check only. $10,000? You're insane! Fine, then get the shrimp off my lawn. You've got 15 minutes before I call the sheriff to report a mass trespass event. The sheriff didn't take 15 minutes. He was there in 10. Deputy Miller, a guy who had seen enough suburban drama to write a book, got out of his cruiser and looked at the chaos. He saw the catering crates piled on the sidewalk, the row of steel fence posts, and Vicky vibrating with rage. "Joe," Miller said, tipping his hat, "Vicky says you're kidnapping her brunch." "I'm securing my property, Deputy," I said, handing him my deed and the certified survey. "The HOA has been using this parcel illegally for decades. I'm the owner of record. I've offered them a temporary use permit for the afternoon, but they've declined the fee. Therefore, they are trespassing." Miller looked at the deed. He looked at the gold seal. He knew the law. In North Carolina, a tax deed issued by the county is one of the strongest forms of ownership you can have. It wipes out all previous liens and claims. "Ma'am," Miller said, turning to Vicky, "he's got the paperwork. This isn't HOA land. If he says you can't be on it, you can't be on it. I'd suggest you move your tables to the street." The mayor arrived just as the caterers were dragging the shrimp crates back to the vans. It was a disaster. The annual lakeside brunch was currently taking place on the hot asphalt of the cul-de-sac, in front of a row of trash cans. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play, the technical breakdown card. "Vicky," I called out, "I've been looking at the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, regulations for private retention basins. According to the Dam Safety Act, an owner of a basin must ensure that the riparian overflow doesn't exceed a certain turbidity level. Because of all the construction runoff from the new houses on the hill, the silt levels in my pond are too high. It's a safety hazard for the neighborhood's foundations." Vicky was trying to ignore me while handing a lukewarm mimosa to the mayor. "So," I continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, "as the responsible owner, I'm initiating a emergency maintenance drawdown. I have to inspect the lower gate valve to ensure the structural integrity of the basin." I walked over to the far side of the pond where the heavy iron wheel of the gate valve was located. This valve connects the pond to the city's main storm sewer. It's designed to drain the pond in case of a flood. I took a large pipe wrench out of my back pocket. Crank, creak, Clunk. The sound of the water rushing into the sewer was a low, guttural roar. Within 20 minutes, the water level of Serenity Pond dropped 3 feet. Now here's a technical fact about suburban retention ponds. They aren't lakes. They are giant bowls of gray anaerobic muck. They are filled with 30 years of rotting grass clippings, dog waste that washed off the sidewalks, and stagnant silt. As the water vanished, the emerald view vanished with it. In its place was a stinking, bubbling crater of gray slime. The smell hit the brunch like a physical wall. It was the scent of 1,000 clogged drains mixed with rotten eggs. It was the smell of hydrogen sulfide gas, the natural byproduct of rotting organic matter at the bottom of a pond. The mayor actually gagged. The state senator covered her face with a silk scarf and headed for her car. The annual lakeside brunch didn't just end, it fled. "Joe, turn it back on," Vicky screamed, her voice cracking. "You're ruining the property values. The smell is coming into my house." "I can't, Vicky," I shouted back. "State law says I have to complete the inspection once the drawdown starts. Safety first. It should be dry enough to inspect in, about 3 weeks, maybe 4 if it doesn't rain." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of legal panic. The HOA's high-priced law firm realized they were in a no-win scenario. Joe owned the pond. Joe owned the drainage system. And because the HOA's streets were designed to flow into that pond, I literally held the entire neighborhood's plumbing in my hand. If I kept that valve open, the Lake Serenity homes would be mud pit homes. Property values would drop by 40% overnight. No bank would issue a mortgage on a house overlooking a stinking environmental hazard. On Monday evening, the entire HOA board, minus Vicky, showed up at my front door. They didn't bring citations. They brought a box of premium cigars and a bottle of single malt scotch. "Joe," the vice president said, his voice humbled, "we made a mistake. Vicky made a mistake. We've reviewed the Serenity Pond bylaws and realized the board exceeded its authority when it restricted your fishing rights." "You think?" I said, leaning against my doorframe. "We're prepared to make this right. We will rescind your $550 fine. We will pay for your property management services for the last week. Let's call it $5,000. In exchange, we want you to close the valve and sign a perpetual use easement allowing the community back onto the grass." I took a long draw from my Yeti. "Not good enough." "What do you want, Joe?" "First, I want a written apology on the front page of the next 3 newsletters, not a clarification. An apology, signed by Vicky. Second, I want a permanent, irrevocable riparian and recreational easement attached to my home's deed. I want the legal right to fish, boat, and sit on that bank until the day I die, and I want that right to transfer to whoever buys my house next. And third," I leaned in, my voice dropping. "Vicky resigns, effective tonight. She's a liability to the aesthetic integrity of this neighborhood." The board didn't even consult a lawyer. They had the resignation papers ready by 10 p.m. Vicky was outvoted and ousted. I closed the valve that night. It took a week of heavy rain to fill the pond back up and wash away the smell, but by the following Saturday, Serenity Pond was back. Vicky sold her house 4 months later. She tried to list it for $850,000, but when the buyer's inspector saw that the lakeside view was technically owned by the neighbor and her patio was encroaching on a private buffer strip, they backed out. She ended up selling it for $620,000 to a guy who didn't care about the lake. He just wanted a big garage. Now it's Saturday morning.
The black chain-link fence is still there. I decided I liked the way it looks. It keeps the low-rent loiterers, which is what I now call the HOA board members, off my side of the bank. I'm sitting in my old bucket, the sun on my back, and a line in the water. Every once in a while, a new neighbor walks by and sees the private property sign. They usually stop and ask, "Is the fishing any good in there?" I just look at them, give them a little wink, and say, "It's the best in the state, but you wouldn't believe what the use fee is." So, tell me, if your neighborhood empress tried to charge you for the air you breathe, would you bow down, or would you buy the air and start charging her rent? Drop a comment below. I'm Joe, and I'll be right here, fishing on my dirt.